Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. The Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations are taking place in St. Andrews from June 2nd to 5th. St. Andrews has had a long history of ties to the monarchy, and here to speak with me about that today is Keith MacKnight and Franklin Cardy of the Charlotte County Archives. Thank you both for joining me today. So Keith, can we start off by talking about St. Andrews is obviously a Loyalist town, a long history of ties to the UK, ties to the monarchy. Can you tell us a little bit about that history and how strong it is?
Yeah, sure. So St. Andrews was founded in 1783 by a group of people called the Loyalists. And they were called the Loyalists because they were loyal to the British monarchy. And these people would have come from America. So after the Revolutionary War for America's independence, these people who were still loyal to the British crown during that whole time found themselves very unwelcome in that country. Some of them endured loss of property, or they felt exiled. Some even felt like their lives might be threatened. And the ones who wanted to continue living in a British colony under British rule decided that the best thing for them to do was to move up north to British North America, which are the colonies that would later become Canada. So stories about the Loyalists who first arrived at this settlement that would end up becoming St. Andrews have endured in this community over very many generations. These stories usually focus on the banishment of the Loyalists, but also their resourcefulness in the face of these new, very difficult circumstances that they found themselves in, because at the time this area was essentially just a wilderness. Local retellings often portray the Loyalists who arrived here as members of society's upper class who are always well-dressed, and they would be arriving on the shores of the Passamaquoddy Bay on these boats which would be loaded with priceless goods and family heirlooms. It's kind of a very romantic image of how this area was settled. And at the time of the community's founding, there was a sort of pride held by a lot of the people that they were going to build a community under British rule that was going to be so much better than anything that the Americans were going to make for themselves. And these people also had very different views of King George III, who is usually portrayed in history and also in media as sort of a cruel or stubborn monarch or an incompetent monarch who lost the colonies. But the Loyalists viewed him as a very just man, and the British government did a lot to help the Loyalists settle in the area. They provided them with food and also with building supplies so they could build their homes, and they had land set aside for them, divided into lots to help the people settle.
Now, obviously, there's still, I think, two houses left that would have been floated across from Castine, Maine. The Salt Box House on Queen Street is one, I think. Can you tell me a little bit, too, about the street names? I know when you drive around St. Andrews, there's obviously some very monarchical, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Street names. Where does it come from, and what's the meaning behind it?
So the streets heading along St. Andrews, there are 13 of them that are named after the 13 children of King George III and Queen Charlotte, and that's also what this whole county of Charlotte County is named after. It was Queen Charlotte. And then there's also, of course, King Street and Queen Street. Those are very obviously monarchical names. And there are 3 more streets that run perpendicular to the 13 streets that are named after King George III's children. And I believe those are Montague Street and the like. And those are named after governors who were still loyal to the British crown.
Wow.
And the only exception to all that is Water Street, which is just called Water Street because it's right next to the water.
Now, another important time in monarchy history and St. Andrews history, and this is jumping way forward, is when Princess Diana and Prince Charles visited the town. I know that that was 1983, was it?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about what brought that visit on?
So the royal visit of Prince Charles and Princess Diana, that was on June 19th, 1983, as you said. And the visit to St. Andrews was part of their 3-day tour of the province of New Brunswick, which was itself part of an 18-day tour for the whole country of Canada. And that tour was timed in part to mark the 200th anniversary of the arrival of the Loyalists in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And the plan for the royal visit was to have them arrive on Her Majesty's yacht, the Britannia, and to come into the community and spend about 3.5 hours in town touring it, going to a church ceremony, and also taking part in a dedication ceremony at the Charlotte County Courthouse. And for the rest of the details on that visit, I think I'll send you over to Franklin, who was actually there and filmed the whole event.
Yes, Franklin. I didn't know that you are responsible for the video that we have in St. Andrews Home Videos. I know you do extensive work on the historical videos of St. Andrews, but you actually shot this one of the visit of Princess Diana.
Oh yes,
and Prince
well
Charles.
we were living in Fredericton at the time, but Dominic was a loyalist at that stage, and Vanessa, our daughter, was into princesses. She was about 9 or 10, and so we all had to come down for the weekend, and we went around everywhere. So I took a video just of our personal story. Obviously there's official video out there of the church service and so forth, but yes, I took that, and so I resurrected that a few years back and put it on YouTube.
What was that experience like for you? I know Princess Diana in my lifetime was always an icon. What was it like to experience her presence here, and how did the town react to her coming?
Oh, I think it was a great experience. Everybody was disappointed about the fog. We couldn't see the yacht, but they emerged from the mist on the wharf, and drove in, and we were all there, and we waved, and well, you can watch the video.
I know I focus on Princess Diana, and Prince Charles is actually touring the Maritimes as we speak with Camilla. What do you think it was about Princess Diana that really resonated with people worldwide? Even Americans love her.
Well, she was so outgoing, and it was such a princess story at that stage. And actually it was then, I think, Charles was beginning to say, why do they always want her on? They went on both sides of the street, alternating, and everybody wanted Di, not Charles so much. But there we are, that's life, isn't it?
Now, do you find when you release a video like that that's historical, but yet there's still so many people that would have been in that crowd that were there that day, that are alive today, still in the town? What kind of feedback do you get from people who see it and might recognize their neighbor or relative, or even themselves as a young child?
I haven't, not so much on that one, although actually John Williamson took a little bit of the video and it's included in that. John Williamson Sr.
Wow.
Now gone. But one of the earliest videos that I worked on was what Bill O'Neill took back in 1953 when the Coronation Parade was on in St Andrews. And so we have this colour film of that parade, and that was one of the first films that I came across. Carmelito O'Neill gave me all Bill O'Neill's films, and I started, we digitized them, and then I started looking for people who might remember who these people were.
Right.
And so we got in touch with all that generation of people that were still around, and people like David Graham and Nancy Kay and Clayton Dixon and a few older ones. And I invited them round and said, can you look at this and can you recognize anybody? And so they recognized a handful.
Okay.
But of course the video is not very clear. It's not, the definition isn't too good, but there are places where it's really clear. So what we did then, the next thing I did was I put numbers on each of these easily recognizable people, potentially easily recognizable. And we identified them, and then I put out onto YouTube, I put a freeze-framed version so that whenever there was a good face on, we didn't know who it was, they had a number put on the screen, and I was hoping people would recognize some people. So we had some feedback, but actually just last week, the mother of a neighbor of ours, they were looking at it and they recognized one or two more people.
Wow.
So she was at 11, I think, and she was in the parade, and she's actually almost at the beginning of the film in a blue dress. So it's the mother of Nancy Stainer across the road.
It's an amazing video, in part because it's so long and it's so hard to come across any kind of video from back then. Who again, what kind of video camera did they use at the time?
Well, Carmelita O'Neill still has the camera that Bill O'Neill used. He got it in 1938, and he started taking colour movie film then. And we know because one of the videos you can see is called Men at Work, I think. It actually has the date on it when they were filming it. And it's in colour. And Kodachrome only became available in 1935 publicly.
Wow.
And by 38 he had colour film, and he was shooting it. And we got quite a lot of his video from before the war, and then more after, the mid-40s, and we got weddings, and there's all kinds of stuff on there. I think there's about 4 hours of Bill O'Neill's films on there. Now, as far as the coronation is concerned, if and when we've got all the names we can, we'll just produce a shortened version.
Okay.
But the great thing about YouTube, of course, is that you can click through it, you can look at what you want, you can stop or go back, and it's no problem. So it may be an hour long, but you don't have to watch it all. Nobody ever watches anything all through, I don't think, anymore.
I'm always surprised at how much better the extended version often does, though. That when we cut stuff down here, people love to take it all in, especially when it has to do with history.
Well, this is what we did. We tried to get comments. They're not narrations. They're comments that people have made, and we recorded it casually instead of bringing it into a studio and making people sit down and behave. They all could giggle together and laugh. And so then I had a lot of audio tape that I had to edit, of course, and it's not always as clear as I hope this is, but it's colloquial.
And I imagine
if people want to take the time to listen to it, they can.
And you might too, through doing that, you find out more pieces of information that would just come from people that have memories and ties to something.
Well, this is it. We got stories. People, quite often that's all it is. People say, "Oh, I remember something."
Mm-hmm. Where can people? So it's St. Andrews Home Videos on YouTube would be the specific channel for people that want to check out not only this video, but I think what's nice about this video is that we have
three channels actually.
Okay.
There's Historic Home Movies of St. Andrews, which is basically St. Andrews, but we also have the Charlotte County video Archives video channel now, which has got it's got films from the Loon Bay Lodge. Jane Garnett was brought up in the Loon Bay Lodge, and she has video from the 1940s of running a lodge up on the St. Croix River. And we've got a bunch of videos. I've lost track of them all. And we also have the Charlotte County Moments, which you know all about, because using or inspired by Bill O'Neill's films and some others, you kindly worked with Sheila and Mark Blagrave and produced these 2-minute versions of these films. So people who are interested in watching a 2 or 3 minute video, we have 9 of those, I think, on there about places and events all over the county.
I know you do extensive work on it, Franklin, and I know from our involvement with the Charlotte County Moments, it's amazing what you learn just in the process of working on something like this. Has there been something in particular you've come across that you didn't know before from working on movies?
Working on St. Andrews movies, everything I learned about St. Andrews. So I only came here full-time 12 years ago. But so I know a lot about what went on in the 40s, more than many people who are here now, by talking to the oldies like me.
And what's been your process like? What's the most challenging thing about doing these movies? I know sometimes it's with the archive videos that we did with Charlotte County Moments, it was interspersing what video we had with photos and piecing all the things together to tell the story.
Well, I seem to be a bit of a nerd, I guess. I mean, I'm quite happy sitting editing and trying to mix things. It's a creative. And I mean, we've done 1 or 2 talks. We just had Al Carpenter from Maine, Calais, came up and gave a talk at the archives about smuggling in the 1800s, early 1800s. So we didn't have any video or anything, but he had a bit of a slideshow, and we got a bunch more slides and put it together to make an illustrated talk. But other when we have a video, then I bring people in to make comments, tell me what it is if they know, or else whatever happens, and then afterwards sit and piece it together. It passes the winters away.
It's definitely those little known facts that I always find the most fascinating about the history of St. Andrews. It's the things we know the least about that tend to be the most fascinating, from smuggling stories that you're talking about, to even about the monarchy or ties. Keith, you were telling me beforehand a few little known facts about St. Andrews' ties to the monarchy in the UK that were of particular interest to you.
Yes. One of my favorite stories related to that is about a man named Charles Joseph Briscoe, who came to live in St. Andrews in the year 1823, and he was rumored to be a son of King George IV and a woman named Marie Anne Fitzherbert, who was a lady of the English court who George had fallen in love with and married in 1785.
Wow.
Today we know that Charles Briscoe actually was born 6 years before that marriage happened, so it's very unlikely he was actually a son of George IV and this woman. But there were rumors persisting in the community at that time that he was the son. And the reason for those rumors is because Briscoe strangely knew a lot about happenings within the English court at the time, which would have really impressed the residents of St. Andrews in the 1820s.
Yeah.
And he had an unusual habit of riding around town on a very impressive-looking white horse with his magnificent scarlet hunting coat. And since he only worked a very menial customs job, that gave people the idea he had another stream of money that he wasn't telling people about. And but the reason, we're not sure where the money came from, but the reason he would have known a lot about what was going on at the English court was through his wife. She was actually the sister of the royal court painter, Sir Thomas Lawrence, and he would have gotten news through her. And the interesting thing about this story is that before Charles Briscoe died, he left instructions that years after his death, his grave could be exhumed, and that if people exhumed his grave, they would learn his family's secret. And years later, his grave was exhumed, and there were documents stored in his grave that were unfortunately not properly stored, and they immediately crumbled to dust. And we have no idea what his family secret was.
What? That is fascinating.
It's a self-destructive email, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it was the smuggling?
Could be.
Do you have any others, Keith?
Another anecdote I like is that the Centennial Park for the town of St. Andrews, which is just across from the blockhouse, was actually opened in a ceremony that featured Queen Elizabeth on July 14th, 1967. And this was part of the local St. Andrews celebrations for the centennial of Canada at the time. And that also involved a very large parade on King Street celebrating her arrival.
Wow. Franklin, is there anything little known that fascinates you?
I love that gate down there. There's a gate to the Centennial Park. There's no fence around it or anything else. And there's a sign up saying Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother she was then, in 66, right? She came and opened this gate, right?
I guess they just needed a gate for the ceremony.
That's right. But yeah, no, there are lots of stories there. And if I can make a pitch here, you know, I've been doing this work now for about 7 years, and we produced a whole bunch of stuff. But it would be great if I can find somebody else who's interested in picking. We have more work. I've got more videos waiting. Actually, we have a video of the Queen Mother's visit, but we haven't. The archive sent it to me, but they're not sure if it was CHSJ and St. John, which is defunct, or whether it's CBC video. And I have to find out before we copyright it, before we distribute it.
So what would be, if we can enlist some volunteers right now by doing this show, what would be some of the work that they could help with?
Well, I mean, anything they like doing. I mean, we have a bunch of, they could help. Well, for instance, I've got some videos that Henry Hansen took at Minister's Island when he was working there. And I planning to go around and talk to him, so he does a bit of commentary to put over these they're silent movies, right? To get a bit of commentary on that. We have, I have a 40 minutes or so of movie that was stationed in 1956 by some New Zealanders who came here. And they spent 2 years in Fredericton. They built a couple of houses, and the houses are still here. They renovated them. They showed how they built the first one, how houses were built in 1956. And they also went and worked on the O'Neill farm for a summer, and they produced a movie basically about growing vegetables in St Andrews. And they got all this video of this farm, and it's waiting on my desk to be produced, if you like. I mean, just to get it finished off and put it in a format. We need some commentary to go with it, and I'm hoping to get Carmelita O'Neill to sit and talk about it, and a few other people knew them. And then when we get a narration of some sort, we can put it on it and put it together to make it more. I mean, the watching silent movies is okay, but it's more interesting if you have some voices and some music.
What are some of your favorite parts about working at the archives? Keith, I'll start with you.
I work a lot with our unprocessed collections, and I always love the mystery of just wondering what I could even find when I look into one of these collections. I think one of my favorite things that I've stumbled across that struck me as pretty significant was a letter that described an explosion that had happened in Vancouver, BC during the Second World War, where there was an accident involving a ship with munitions stored in it. And it was a very, very vivid description of that event that had been shared between these two women, one from this area and one from Vancouver.
Wow. So there's a sense too with what you do that you're part of the history writing process. So you can fill in the pieces that might be missing, even not just from here, but elsewhere.
Yes.
There's another one we have on our list at the moment. We started transcribing old handwritten documents, and Shirley Brinkhurst discovered a diary written in 1877 by a farmer in the Rolling Dam area, and it describes, through the year, it describes his daily life. And Shirley said this would make a good video, slideshow if you like. And so we're working on that. She gathered a lot of images together. We need some more. And we're going to try and find some good images and probably borrow some from King's Landing, because it's just the same era, and put it all together and make an interesting video out of it, I hope. So that'll be a new one.
How common is it when you do a project, a video for instance, that more people come forward and say, oh, I have this at my house, or my mother might have had this? Do you find a lot of the things you have at the archives come through just putting one thing out and then it leads to more discoveries?
Well, we keep sending word out to people saying, if you've got old movies in your attic or you're throwing them out, or please tell us. And the latest thing we did is we actually bought digitizing these is obviously a problem. In the past, Costco were doing it, but we've got a digitizer now. So if somebody has a little box, yellow boxes of Kodachrome 8mm or Super 8 film, if they lend it to us, we can digitize it and then see if there's anything on it that of public interest, and they can have the whole thing back.
One of my favorite videos that I've discovered is the Katie's Cove, people skating on Katie's Cove, things that you didn't know happened back when. Is there any particular piece of history that you have at the archives that you revisit the most, that you enjoy viewing or reading?
Well, I'm mostly doing the audio-visual stuff and bossing the board around. But no, the ice skate, people were amazed about skating in Katie's Cove. Not only that, but there are many stories, some of which must be true, about people actually skiing or skating across to Deer Island, which is 8 kilometers, if I remember right. And you know, we haven't seen ice like that. Well, we've got video we've got film of the ice in the harbour, and ships covered in ice, which we haven't seen in our recent years.
Does the truth often, I know that sometimes we look back at history and think, especially when we speak of St. Andrews, it seems like mythology at times, but as you mentioned, this white horse strike, things often live up to what the myth is. Is that you're finding in some of the research you do?
Trying to think. To an extent, there's always that element of like, sometimes life just isn't that interesting. Sometimes there's a more logical explanation for things. Like in the story I just mentioned, this man knew a lot about the English court that got people thinking, oh, he might be related to the royal family, but he was probably just hearing stuff through his wife because she was probably still corresponding with friends in England. So there's always something like that you often come across. But even that I find interesting. Piecing together all the little ways that people interact and are connected with each other that lead to some very surprising things happening. I think that's interesting, even if it's not like very mythical or magical feeling.
Well, it's nice to know that the characters of the town way back when were just as interesting as they are now.
If I can add one thing to your previous question, we are looking for people to record their stories. And talking of the archives in general, we have some kits available now. I'm calling them backpacks. That they've got mics, they've got all the gear that people need to go and interview their friends, their neighbours, and we're really interested to try and get people to record their stories. And whether it's on video, they can do it on video. It's easy now. You can put a little video camera on the table. It's practically anybody can manage it. And we're hoping that there will be a lot of people in the county who will be interested in recording their neighbours' stories, or their own, for that matter, particularly.
That's a great idea, and I hope to have, what I'd like to do is make this a more regular occurrence, have you back soon to talk about what you're working on, and we'll get the public involved. I know we think of what we do here as future archives, because we are recording the people of the moment.
So, loyal supporters.
Thank you both so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
My guests today have been Keith MacKnight and Franklin Cardy of the Charlotte County Archives. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.